The lights of late-night television have seen drama.
Next cojones goes to a man who's dear to my heart for standing up for stand-up. When dozens of Netflix employees walked out over Dave Chappelle's reckless decision to perform comedy on his comedy special. CEO Ted Sarandos could have pulled the special and replaced it with more episodes of Who Wants to Watch Koreans Get Killed. But instead, he reminded his Netflix employees that comedy exists to push boundaries and told them if you'd find it hard to support our content breadth, Netflix may not be the best place for you. So, for making the phrase, "Don't let the door hit you in the ass," never sound better.
Before. But what unfolded during Bill Maher's live segment left everyone, from Hollywood elites to everyday viewers, completely speechless. It started as another sharp-tongued monologue. But within minutes, Maher flipped the script on Hollywood's self-proclaimed moral guardians. The audience didn't know whether to laugh, gasp, or just sit frozen as...
There's no getting around the fact that what was on the mind of the liberals that night in Brentwood, or wherever we may have been, was that the most powerful witch hunters now were coming from Twitter, the Ivy League, and the progressive left. J.K. Rowling used to be a villain to the right because she wrote books about witchcraft. Now she's a villain to the left because she has the crazy belief that there's more to being a woman than pronouns.
As he began calling out names, real names, one by one, taking direct aim at celebrities he claimed were living in a fantasy world built on hashtags and hypocrisy. Social media exploded before the segment even ended, with clips circulating under hashtags like Jar Maher Meltdown and Chow Me Woke Wars. Some fans hailed him as a hero for finally saying what everyone was too scared to say, while others accused him of orchestrating a cruel ambush for ratings. Whispers from behind the scenes suggest even the producers weren't prepared for how far he'd go that night. Phones were ringing off the hook.
So that was the point of the evening. How do we take a stand against cancel culture? And I suggested, since we were mostly all in show business, that we start an award show to honor the brave people who have fought back. Well, I gotta tell you, the idea was met with great enthusiasm by everyone. And in short order, different people were suggesting the ways that their varied talents could be put to use. And then, of course, being Hollywood, nothing happened. But it's still a good idea, so I'm gonna do it right here, right now, and not only that, we're gonna do it every year.
In Hollywood's most exclusive circles, publicists scrambling, and A-list stars allegedly demanding statements of apology that never came. And as the live cameras kept rolling, Maher leaned in, smirked, and delivered one final line that would send shockwaves through the industry. No one saw it coming, but everyone's still talking about it. It all began on a Friday night when the audience packed into the studio expecting a regular episode of Real Time. The lights dimmed, the applause rolled in, and Bill Maher walked onto the stage with that familiar smirk that always hinted.
Our first award goes to the president of my alma mater, Cornell University, Martha Pollack. This month, students there demanded trigger warnings before all the lectures in case any of the adult subjects you specifically went to college to learn about came up. And Martha said, yeah, no, we're not doing that. She didn't cave in or hire a new dean of sensitivity. She just said, no, college is for introducing you to new ideas, not for kissing your and making you feel wonderful and always.
Trouble was coming. He looked calmer than usual, yet there was a strange tension in the air, like the quiet before a storm. Even his crew seemed to sense something was off. He started with his usual jokes, a few light jabs at politics, and then paused for a moment too long. The silence stretched, and the camera slowly zoomed in. What he said next sent a jolt through the room. He began speaking about Hollywood, not in admiration, but in open frustration. He said the very industry that once celebrated freedom of thought had now become its own kind of dictatorship. People laughed awkwardly at first, unsure if it was still a bit, but his tone hardened. His eyes locked on the lens, and the laughter died down. There was a time, he said,
Brunch with your parents. I'm just amazed at how this generation can simultaneously be too sensitive for anything distasteful and somehow also so into eating. So, Cornell, I present you with these balls. I sure could have used them when
he said, when comedians, actors, and writers could say what they felt without needing a permission slip from Twitter. The audience went dead quiet. You could hear someone cough in the background. Now, he continued, if your joke doesn't fit the narrative, if your opinion doesn't pass the purity test, you're done. The words carried a chill. Fans online later said it was like watching someone pull the curtain off Hollywood's carefully polished image. He began naming names, not in anger, but with a kind of weary disbelief. He talked about how once genuine artists were now performing outrage for applause.
Our next award goes to the place where many Cornell grads will be working next year, Trader Joe's. Trader Joe's, who for years have been selling a line of ethnically themed products, trading on the name Joe. For example, they have Trader Jose's beer. So, of course, one teenager on Twitter heard the word Jose and said it was racist, and then there was a petition, and then Trader Joe's management did the right thing. They burnt down all their stores and killed themselves. No, they didn't. They said, you oversensitive.
It's not acting anymore, he said. It's auditioning for approval. From inside the studio claimed that producers started receiving frantic texts from publicists the moment he said that. Some wanted the segment cut from the live feed, but it was too late. The clip had already gone viral within minutes. Trending tags like Maher Truth and Hollywood Unmasked started spreading like wildfire. Some viewers were cheering him on, saying he finally exposed what everyone secretly felt. Others accused him of trying to stir chaos just to stay relevant. But the tension only built when he turned his attention towards specific moments in pop culture. He brought up how entire careers had been derailed over jokes, how comedians had to write their sets like legal documents. The audience started clapping nervously. Maher just smirked, and then came the part no one expected. He shifted the conversation from general criticism to something far
and a sense of humor and released this statement. We disagree that any of these labels are racist, and we do not make decisions based on petitions. You see how easy it is? So to the home of the 19-cent banana.
Far more personal. He said he'd recently been invited to an award dinner in Brentwood, a glamorous, star-studded event meant to celebrate voices of progress. He described the evening as surreal, surrounded by people who talked about empathy while treating waiters like invisible ghosts. I realized that night, he said, the new witch hunters aren't wearing robes or holding torches. They're holding iPhones. A few gasps rippled through the audience. They don't burn you at the stake anymore, he added. They just cancel you with a hashtag. Someone from the...
This next cojones goes to a man who's dear to my heart for standing up for stand-up. When dozens of Netflix employees walked out over Dave Chappelle's reckless decision to perform comedy on his comedy special. CEO Ted Sarandos could have pulled the special and replaced it with more episodes of Who Wants to Watch Koreans Get Killed. But instead, he reminded his Netflix employees that comedy exists to push boundaries and told them if you'd find it hard to support our content breadth, Netflix may not be the best place for you. So, for making the phrase, "Don't let the door hit you in the ass," never sound better.
The audience shouted, "Say their names!" Maher didn't hesitate. He mentioned a few celebrities who had built careers preaching tolerance but turned on their own the moment someone disagreed. The crowd shifted uncomfortably, some clapping, others frozen. It was part comedy, part confession, part rebellion. By now, even people backstage were whispering. You could see a producer nervously signaling to wrap it up, but Maher ignored it. He wasn't done. He began describing a secret conversation that allegedly took place between a group of actors after a canceled comedian tried to defend himself online. According to Maher, one actor said, "We just can't be seen supporting him. It's bad optics." The audience groaned. Maher paused, nodded, and said quietly, "Bad optics. That's what we've become." The crowd erupted.
When movie lovers get together these days, one phrase that comes up a lot and always makes me sad is, "Yeah, you couldn't make that one today." Top of that list is the great Tropic Thunder, which the scolds have been after for years. But in February, Ben Stiller tweeted, "I make no apologies for Tropic Thunder. It's always been a controversial movie since when we opened, proud of it and the work everyone did on it." See, people, it's not that hard. He said it, and he still got a commercial. And the lesson is, if you stand up to the mob for just a day or two, their shallow, impatient, immature, smartphone-driven, gerbil minds will forget about it and go on to the next nothing burger and
Did an applause that time, not out of laughter, but from something deeper. Fans online later said it felt like watching someone finally break free from the spell of Hollywood conformity. But behind that applause was a growing storm. Within hours, celebrity circles were buzzing. Some called him brave. Others called him reckless. And as the cameras cut to a break, Maher leaned back in his chair, eyes half closed, like a man who knew exactly what he'd just started. Word spread faster than wildfire. Reporters claimed that the next morning, several big-name agents had contacted HBO demanding clarification. But Maher wasn't backing down. He returned after the break with even more edge, declaring that if Hollywood wanted to live inside a bubble, it could. But he refused to. And that's when the mood in the room changed.
once said, "I am moving if Trump is my president. I don't say things I don't mean." Here she is looking miserable, having to endure America at the Grammys last Sunday. I guess she flew back from Tajikistan.
Changed completely. The laughter was gone. This wasn't entertainment anymore. It was confrontation. One audience member later tweeted that it felt like watching a man unload years of frustration in real time. Every word felt sharper, heavier, like a wound he'd been waiting to open. As he began recounting stories about how comedians were afraid to speak their minds, he looked almost angry, but not at the people. Angry at the silence. "The real problem," he said, "isn't that people get offended. It's that everyone's too scared to say what they actually think." The studio erupted in uneasy clapping again. He smiled thinly. "See? Even applause feels like permission these days." Influencers clipped it, reposted it, and comment sections filled with debates. Some said he was a genius for calling out the hypocrisy. Others accused him.
Eddie Griffin said, "If Trump wins, I'm moving to Africa." Apparently very slowly, because in Trump's 4 years, he only got as far as Van Nuys. George Lopez once said that if Trump won, he won't have to worry about immigration. We'll all go back.
Him of mocking real social progress. But the truth was clear. The conversation he started wasn't going away. In the days that followed, Hollywood insiders whispered about secret meetings, damage control calls, and private group chats filled with panic. But Maher, the man who had spent decades navigating controversy, was calm. That night, when he walked off stage, he reportedly told a crew member, "Finally said it." And that's where the real storm began. The fallout from that night came fast. By sunrise, every major outlet was buzzing with headlines, half of them praising him for speaking his mind, the other half calling for his removal. Publicists worked overtime crafting careful responses, trying to distance their clients from the chaos, while fans on social media treated the entire thing like a cultural event. Some people even called it the Maher moment. But what made it worse for Hollywood insiders was that Maher didn't go silent after the show. Instead, he doubled down. His opening line was simple but loaded with defiance. "Apparently," he said, "you can't even talk about free speech without someone asking for your apology." The audience burst out laughing, but there was an undertone of disbelief. It was like he knew exactly what strings to pull. He wasn't just criticizing cancel culture anymore. He was daring it to come for him. Behind the scenes, executives at HBO reportedly held a tense meeting that same morning, debating whether to issue a formal statement. One insider claimed that Maher himself told them, "If you release anything that sounds like an apology, I'll read it on air just to show how ridiculous it sounds." But this wasn't just about a TV host versus Hollywood. It was becoming something bigger, a public test of how far the entertainment industry could go before someone pushed back. Celebrities started posting vague messages about accountability and kindness, clearly trying to signal their disapproval without naming him directly. But then something unexpected happened. An old clip of Dave Chappelle defending comedy resurfaced, and suddenly, fans began drawing parallels between the two. Comments flooded in, calling Maher and Chappelle the last voices of sanity. Hashtags like "Stand Up for Stand Up" and "Sagar Let Comedy Breathe" started trending. Within hours, the internet turned the controversy into a movement. And then came the twist that no one saw coming. A leaked recording from a private Hollywood charity dinner began circulating online. In the clip, a group of high-profile actors and producers could be heard mocking Maher's speech, calling it an outdated rant from a man who doesn't understand progress. One voice in the recording, allegedly belonging to a well-known actress, could be heard saying, "He's not brave. He's bitter." Within minutes, the clip went viral. Fans demanded answers, tagging celebrities and asking if they were part of the conversation. It was chaos. Twitter turned into a battlefield. Every post, every comment, every like became a weapon. Meanwhile, Maher stayed silent. For 3 whole days, he said nothing, letting the outrage burn itself out. But on the 4th day, he returned to his podcast and broke his silence. "You know," he said quietly, "I used to think the opposite of courage was fear. Now I think it's approval." That one line was enough to reignite the entire debate. Fans called it poetic. Critics called it manipulative. Either way, it kept his name trending for another week. Reports began emerging that several networks were quietly discussing pulling future collaborations with him. But another rumor said that Netflix had reached out to him privately, offering a potential new special. People couldn't tell what was true anymore. It became impossible to separate facts from speculation. Talk shows debated him. Morning programs analyzed him, and online creators made thousands of videos about the scandal. Everyone had an opinion, and every opinion only added fuel to the fire. Then came the most surprising revelation of all. An anonymous source from inside the studio claimed that the reaction from Hollywood elites wasn't just anger, it was fear. According to this source, several major celebrities had instructed their teams to scrub old tweets, interviews, and clips where they'd mocked free speech or supported canceling other comedians. It seemed like the entire industry was suddenly terrified that Maher's speech had made them look hypocritical. "They all talk about speaking truth to power," the source said, "but they panic when someone actually does it." At this point, what had started as one comedian's rant had turned into a cultural reckoning. People began revisiting past controversies, questioning whether some of the so-called cancellations had been justified at all. Even academic panels and university debates started referencing Maher's comments, framing them as a turning point in how entertainment and politics collided. But amid all this noise, Maher kept his focus sharp. He continued calling out what he saw as double standards, even referencing the Trader Joe's and Cornell incidents, saying they were proof that sanity still existed somewhere. During another live broadcast, he shared a story about receiving hundreds of letters from students and comedians thanking him for standing up. He read one on air from a college senior who said, "You made me realize it's okay to disagree and still be decent." The audience went silent again. And for a brief moment, the show felt less like satire and more like therapy. But then, as if to remind everyone that he wasn't backing down, Maher chuckled and added, "Don't worry, I'm not turning into a motivational speaker." Laughter returned, but the tension stayed. Behind the laughter, Hollywood was shifting. Interviews started to sound more cautious. Scripts were edited more carefully, and talk show hosts seemed visibly nervous about stepping out of line. Even those who had mocked Maher before were now avoiding his name altogether. One journalist noted that silence became the new strategy in Hollywood, because anything said could be twisted by either side. It was clear that Maher had struck a nerve that wouldn't stop throbbing anytime soon. And just when it seemed like things might settle, a strange report surfaced, one that turned everything upside down. An anonymous insider claimed that a group of Hollywood publicists had secretly formed what they called the Narrative Task Force, a private coalition meant to coordinate responses whenever a celebrity said something controversial. The goal, apparently, was to make sure no single figure could hijack the cultural conversation. The revelation set social media ablaze again. Fans connected dots, speculating that this shadow group had been trying to contain the fallout from Maher's rant. Nobody knew for sure, but the rumor alone deepened the sense that Hollywood was more orchestrated than anyone imagined. Through it all, Maher didn't flinch. In fact, he addressed the rumor directly, smirking as he said on his next show, "I'd love to meet this secret task force. Maybe they can finally write me a better apology than the one Twitter keeps demanding." The crowd erupted in laughter, but underneath it was admiration. People started calling him untouchable. Even those who disagreed with his politics admitted he had done something almost impossible in modern Hollywood. He survived saying what he believed. And in a town built on image, that kind of survival was the biggest rebellion of all. By the third week, the controversy had turned into something bigger than anyone expected. What started as a viral moment had evolved into a full-blown cultural storm, with late-night talk shows, podcasts, and even college campuses dissecting every word Maher had said. Every clip from that night was being replayed, slowed down, analyzed, and remixed. Memes flooded social media, some painting him as a truth-telling hero, others mocking him as a bitter old man raging against change. But what truly shocked everyone was how the story began bleeding into real life. People were choosing sides, friendships were breaking apart, and even Hollywood insiders who usually kept quiet were suddenly being asked, "So where do you stand?" Rumors began to swirl that several major celebrities were planning to respond publicly. One gossip column even claimed that a small group of actors, including one Oscar winner, were organizing a televised solidarity event to reaffirm Hollywood's commitment to progress. Insiders said it was supposed to be a polite, united front, but behind closed doors it was chaos. One leaked message thread showed some of those same celebrities arguing about whether confronting Maher directly might just make him look stronger. "He thrives on backlash," one of them allegedly said. "If we go after him, we make him the underdog." Meanwhile, Maher stayed silent again, which only added to the mystery. Fans began speculating that he was working on something, maybe a documentary, maybe a follow-up special. The internet buzzed with theories, and every quiet day felt like the calm before another storm. When he finally broke the silence, it wasn't in a studio. It was in a spontaneous, unscripted interview caught by a street reporter outside a restaurant in Los Angeles. The reporter asked him if he regretted his statements. Maher smiled and said, "Regret is for people who want to be liked." That clip alone racked up millions of views in less than 24 hours. Next was even wilder. An anonymous blogger leaked what they claimed was a private email, exchanged between a group of streaming executives discussing whether they should distance themselves from Maher's views. The email hinted at internal disagreements. One exec argued that silencing him would prove his point, while another worried about alienating the younger demographic. Within hours, the supposed leak was everywhere. News anchors debated whether it was real, and social media erupted again. People began wondering if this was all part of a larger cultural shift, a breaking point in Hollywood's long dance between freedom of expression and public approval. Then, as if scripted by fate, something happened that flipped the narrative completely. One of the actors Maher had indirectly referenced, a fan favorite with a squeaky clean image, decided to clap back. During a live charity gala, she took the stage and delivered a pointed speech about privilege hiding behind free speech. She didn't name him outright, but everyone knew. The crowd applauded, but online, the reaction was brutal. Fans accused her of hypocrisy, posting old clips where she herself had laughed at edgy jokes or made controversial remarks. Within hours, her team had to disable comments across her social platforms. The same people who once idolized her now flooded her feeds with angry messages. "This isn't courage," one fan wrote. "This is performance." Meanwhile, comedians from across the country began weighing in. Joe Rogan mentioned Maher's segment on his podcast, calling it the kind of conversation Hollywood needed but didn't want to have. Even Chris Rock reportedly sent Maher a private message saying, "You just said what half of us think every day." Those words leaked somehow, and fans treated them like proof that a quiet rebellion was brewing within comedy circles. More comedians began openly supporting Maher's stance, saying that the fear of being canceled had stifled creativity for too long. Suddenly, it wasn't just about Maher anymore. It was about the soul of comedy itself. Interview 13/17/1335, but the backlash from Hollywood elites grew more desperate. A popular magazine released an op-ed accusing Maher of romanticizing insensitivity. It called his fans nostalgic for a time when cruelty could hide behind a punchline. Yet, the article backfired spectacularly. Readers flooded the comment section, pointing out that comedy had always been about testing limits and exposing absurdities. The debate spread everywhere, from living rooms to lecture halls, and even political commentators started joining in. One senator tweeted, "When comedians are afraid to joke, democracy loses its humor." It became the most retweeted line of the week. Then came the emotional twist no one saw coming. During his next show, Maher revealed something personal. He said he'd received a handwritten letter from a veteran comedian who'd quietly retired after being canceled years ago. The letter read, "I thought I was the problem. Turns out, I was just early." Maher's voice cracked slightly when he read those words aloud. The audience grew quiet, and for once, his usual sarcasm faded into something almost tender. "This isn't about politics anymore," he said softly. "It's about the right to laugh without being scared." That moment hit differently. Even critics admitted later that it was one of the rawest things they'd ever seen on live TV. Social media lit up with clips of him holding that letter, and hashtags like Grandreitoloff and comedy is not a crime began trending. What had started as a feud between a comedian and an industry now felt like a movement reclaiming something people didn't realize they'd lost. But Hollywood wasn't ready to let go. That same week, a major studio announced it was reviewing all past content to ensure it aligned with modern values. Instantly, fans saw it as a thinly veiled response to Maher's comments. Even mainstream news channels started using the phrase, "the Maher effect," describing how one man's rant had shaken an entire industry's foundation. One commentator quipped, "He didn't just light a match, he threw it into the gasoline tank." As the weeks rolled on, the ripple effects reached unexpected places. Smaller networks began inviting edgier comedians to return. Podcasts started featuring guests who'd been previously blacklisted for controversial opinions. In one viral video, a college comedy club announced it was dropping its content review board, saying, "We're bringing back real humor." The announcement drew both praise and fury, with students arguing over whether this was progress or regression. Still, the conversation had changed. The fear that once hovered over every joke was starting to fade. Maher himself seemed oddly calm amid the chaos. Friends claimed he'd stopped checking social media altogether, spending his days writing new material and refusing to engage in interviews. "He said what he needed to say," one insider explained, "and now he's just letting the world react." Yet even in his absence, the storm kept raging. Every network, every journalist, every influencer wanted to interpret his message differently. But what united everyone, fans, critics, and even rivals, was the undeniable truth that Maher had shaken the system. And just when everyone thought they'd seen it all, a new piece of footage leaked, a behind-the-scenes clip from the night of the infamous broadcast. It showed Maher in the dressing room just minutes before going live, pacing silently, holding a note card with a single line written on it. "Say it anyway." No one knew who filmed it, but once it hit the internet, it became iconic. People started printing it on t-shirts, posters, even graffiti walls. "Say it anyway" turned into the slogan of a generation tired of walking on eggshells. What began as a monologue had now transformed into a movement, and Hollywood couldn't decide whether to ignore it or embrace it. The world had changed, and there was no going back. By the fourth month after that night, The storm Maher had unleashed was no longer just confined to Hollywood. It had spilled into every corner of pop culture. Talk show hosts, musicians, influencers, and even athletes had started taking sides, turning what began as one man's rant into a full-blown identity war. Some called it the Great Divide of entertainment. Studios were terrified of taking the wrong stance, and publicists were rewriting statements every hour just to avoid fueling new headlines. Yet through all the noise, Maher remained eerily silent. He hadn't given interviews, hadn't issued clarifications, nothing. That silence, more than anything, drove people crazy. It made everyone wonder if he was planning something even bigger. Rumors soon surfaced that HBO executives had been flooded with demands for a public dialogue between Maher and a group of high-profile Hollywood figures who felt personally targeted. Allegedly, a live debate was being arranged behind the scenes. Whispers spread online that the list of potential participants included one of the actors from the Solidarity event, a major pop star known for her activism, and even a director who had previously accused Maher of punching down. Fans were divided. Some eagerly awaited the confrontation, while others feared it would turn into another public spectacle. The internet buzzed for days. Then, one morning, HBO confirmed it. A special live broadcast titled Hollywood Unplugged, an honest conversation, would air the following Friday night. The announcement broke the internet. The promo clip featured only a dark background, Maher's voice saying, "They want honesty. Let's give them some." No dramatic music, no slogans, just that line. Ticket sales for the live audience sold out in minutes. Fans camped outside the studio. Reporters surrounded the entrance, and Hollywood's biggest names pretended not to care but secretly tuned in. When the night came, the tension was almost unbearable. Maher walked on stage in a black suit, calm, unbothered, with that signature smirk. Opposite him sat 3 guests, each representing the part of Hollywood that had accused him of being out of touch. The exchange began politely. Scripted smiles, cautious words, but it didn't stay that way for long. One actress leaned forward and said, "Bill, don't you think your so-called honesty just fuels hate?" Maher raised an eyebrow. "You mean disagreement?" he asked. She frowned. "I mean prejudice," the crowd murmured. Maher replied, "No. What fuels hate is pretending people can't talk about things that make them uncomfortable." That line hit hard. Another guest, a young director, jumped in, saying, "People look up to you. They take your words as gospel. When you dismiss progress as wokeness, you give cover to ignorance." Maher smirked slightly, replying, "Progress is great, kid." "Performance isn't," the audience gasped. For the next 20 minutes, the conversation swung between tense silence and explosive applause. The pop star tried to mediate, saying, "Maybe this isn't about cancel culture, but about accountability." Maher nodded. "Sure, accountability's fine, as long as it's not a weapon dressed up as virtue." Even his critics couldn't hide their unease. One visibly uncomfortable guest tried to change the subject, but Maher cut in again. "You know what I've learned? Everyone in Hollywood talks about bravery, until it costs them something." The room fell silent. Cameras zoomed in. For a brief moment, even his guests had no comeback. After the broadcast ended, the internet went into meltdown mode. Clips of the confrontation flooded social media, each side twisting the conversation to fit their own narrative. One camp called it Maher's redemption. Others labeled it the arrogance of privilege. The hashtags Nati Maher and Cancel Maher trended simultaneously, turning Twitter into a digital war zone. Still, the general sentiment among viewers was that, love him or hate him, Maher had refused to back down. It was rare in a world where even the biggest names bowed to online outrage. In the following days, unexpected voices began speaking up in his defense. Ted Sarandos from Netflix released a short statement saying, "Art doesn't exist to comfort, it exists to challenge." That single sentence reignited the fire. Comedian after comedian started echoing similar sentiments. Podcasts, late-night shows, and online forums were overflowing with conversations about free expression. Even J.K. Rowling tweeted a rare message, simply saying, Agree or disagree, courage is contagious. That tweet alone sent shockwaves through every corner of the internet. Hollywood found itself in a place it hadn't been in years, forced to actually debate rather than just perform unity. But while the conversation exploded, the personal toll began to show. Insiders revealed that Maher had started receiving threats, and his team had increased security at the studio. Some of his old friends reportedly distanced themselves, worried about being caught in the crossfire. Yet others, people who'd once been silenced or canceled, began reaching out privately to thank him. One message from a veteran actor simply read, "I thought we lost our voice. Thank you for reminding me it's still there." That message, according to a crew member, brought Maher to tears for the first time in years. Despite the chaos, a quiet shift began spreading through Hollywood. New projects started emerging that embraced more open dialogue. Studios began reconsidering old bands, reaching out to creators they'd previously dropped. It wasn't a revolution, not yet, but something had changed. Comedy clubs reported rising attendance again, with comedians saying audiences finally seemed ready to laugh freely. People weren't whispering opinions anymore. They were speaking them. Whether one agreed with Maher or not, his words had cracked the glass ceiling of fear that hovered over creative spaces. Weeks later, on his next regular episode, Maher opened the show not with a rant, but with a smile. "Well," he said, "turns out honesty still gets good ratings." The crowd laughed. He looked around the audience for a moment before continuing, "But let me make one thing clear. This was never about me. It was about whether people can disagree and still share a stage." Applause echoed through the studio. "You don't have to like what I say," he added. "You just have to let me say it." It wasn't a punchline. It was a statement of purpose. Outside the studio that night, fans held up signs that read, "Say it anyway." Others wore shirts printed with quotes from his infamous monologue. The movement that began as outrage had evolved into something else. A messy, imperfect call for balance between sensitivity and freedom. The irony was that the man accused of dividing Hollywood had somehow reminded it what conversation was supposed to be. As the credits rolled that night, cameras caught a rare, candid shot of Maher backstage. He wasn't smiling this time. He looked thoughtful, almost tired. Someone from the crew asked if he'd finally gotten everything off his chest. He reportedly said, "No one ever really does. I just wanted people to stop pretending." He grabbed his jacket, turned toward the exit, and walked away as the studio lights dimmed behind him. Outside, a group of fans cheered his name, phones raised high, recording every moment. He stopped briefly, gave a small wave, and disappeared into the dark night. And that's how one man's refusal to apologize became the spark for Hollywood's biggest reckoning in years. Whether people loved him or hated him, one truth stood unshaken. Bill Maher had made the world stop pretending. And as the dust settles, one question still lingers. Did Bill Maher really cross the line? Or did he finally say what millions have been too afraid to admit? Love him or hate him, there's no denying that his words have forced Hollywood, and the rest of us, to look in the mirror. Has cancel culture gone too far? Or is this the price of holding people accountable? Whatever side you're on, one thing is clear. The conversation is far from over. If you've been following this story, you already know how divided things have become. But maybe that's exactly what makes it so powerful. Maybe this isn't just about one comedian or one viral rant. It's about an entire generation deciding what freedom of expression really means in the modern world. And whether you think Maher is a hero or a hypocrite, you can't deny that he's changed the tone of the debate. So now it's your turn. What do you think? Was Bill Maher brave for standing up to Hollywood's outrage machine? Or reckless for taking it too far on live TV? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. Make sure you hit the like button if you enjoyed this deep dive. And don't forget to subscribe for more updates, breakdowns, and the stories everyone's whispering about behind the scenes. Tap the bell icon so you never miss a video when the next chapter in this drama unfolds. Because if history has shown us anything, the story is just getting started.